Good morning and welcome to Bolton. I'm Joyce Stilley, the Administrative Officer for the Town of Bolton, and this is a live show done the first and the third Tuesdays of each month from 10:30 to 11 a.m. The show is rebroadcast on the second and fourth Tuesdays at the same time. The show is a continuing effort to promote open communications within the community, and if you have an organization, an upcoming event, or a topic that you would like to see us cover, please contact me at the Town Hall and we will try to get your show on the air. At our last show, we talked with representatives from the Capital Region Council of Governments about emergency planning. And we've continued that theme. That my guest today is Jim Rupert, our Emergency Management Director. Welcome, Jim.
Good morning, and thank you for having me here.
And what people may not realize is that this is just one of many hats you wear, that you're also our building official and zoning enforcement officer.
That's correct, but it's an important job.
It is, and unfortunately, people may think you only have something to do when an emergency hits us, like a blizzard.
Well, that would be nice, except, you know, because you're there with me regularly, that we're constantly planning for the next event, whatever that may be, and we're always learning from the last event areas that we can be more prepared and help our community be more prepared, because eventually that preparedness, when a disaster hits us, being prepared helps us to recover that much more quickly and makes our town much more resilient.
And we have an emergency operations plan that's reviewed on a yearly basis, and it's not a small plan. It's pretty detailed. It follows the template from the state, but there's meetings that you attend and swearing-in ceremonies.
That's correct. In fact, I missed the swearing-in ceremony this past year. We had an emergency management directors meeting in Hartford that I had a previous engagement I was unable to attend. So I'm actually meeting our Region 3 coordinator on Tuesday afternoon to be sworn in once again to uphold my duties and responsibilities as the emergency management director for the town of Bolton.
And, you know, in the last 2 years, we've been hit harder than other years in a long period of time with things that have needed additional attention. And throughout that, you know, you've put in a tremendous amount of extra hours.
That's true, but you know, it's what we need to do to help to get the job done at the time. I mean, you know as well as I do. You lived it with me, and so did the representatives, our community members. You know, we had trees down, we had power lines down, we had telephone poles broken, we had power substations that were out, we had 3 and 4 feet of snow in some places, we had high winds. I mean, over the last 3 years, we've been hit with just about every kind of disaster. Maybe the only one thing we've missed so far is a tornado and an ice storm, but we really had a lot of ill effects from several different types of storms.
We've gotten to spend some quality time together.
That we have. And you know, everybody plays a key role. You know, many of the folks that work every day at our town office building volunteer to spend some extra time with us to help serve the community that you know, provides them with a living. And you know, our town crew certainly is a huge part of this job. Our town leadership, you know, the first selectman was out there during that snowstorm in a very old plow truck.
Yes.
You know, more than doing his part, you know, during the hurricane, he was out helping cut up trees, and we can't say enough about the fire department. The past chief and the current chief is on board as well. You know, the leadership and the members of our local fire department, you know, we're just tremendously blessed with a great group.
And one of the things that, as time has gone on and the high school project has been completed, even working with the school and especially cafeteria to help with that aspect has just been an added blessing.
Yeah, that was certainly one of the things that we took advantage of during one of our more recent disasters, is that we utilized the cafeteria at the high school, and we also used some staff from the school. And they were very helpful in not only providing meals, but places for folks to shower and, all kinds of other things. It was certainly a tremendous blessing having that facility and that group of people assisting us through those disasters.
And as a small town, I think it shows that pulling together in time of need.
There's always been a strong sense of community here, but certainly whenever a disaster strikes, you've got neighbors helping neighbors, and you've got just folks from everywhere pulling together and doing whatever it takes to get the job done and getting life back to normal as quickly as possible.
And in my one November show, Jen Ochoa, the Director of Senior and Social Services, did the show. And just as a reminder that she tries to keep track of people that may have special needs for an emergency. It may be the elderly, just to do checks, but it may be somebody with a special need, medical need, or something else, so that we know and are aware and can try to help to provide whatever services might be necessary.
Yeah, we started that a while back. We call it our at-risk citizens list, and we update that annually. Usually that's done in conjunction with the fire department, who may have responded or know some fragile folks in our community. Certainly if somebody out there is listening and they feel that they should be put on this list, if they contact us, we'll make sure that they get put on the list. Also, Jen, Senior and Social Services, is in contact with a lot of those folks. And also, believe it or not, our assessor's office,
Yes.
Oftentimes is in touch with those folks and often adds value to that list. So, and it is a list that, when we have a circumstance where people may be at risk, we try to reach out to each of those people by telephone. If we can't reach them by phone, somebody physically goes to their address to check on them,
Yes.
which I think is tremendous.
Yes, and part of that is, being a smaller town, we can do some of those things that a Hartford could never dream
Couldn't
of.
do, that's correct.
Yes. Certainly costs have impacted us the last couple of years with all these disasters. And we talked briefly at the last show about the Capital Region providing us with, pillows and blankets and cots for different things. And actually now we just get an email that they're going to provide us with a couple of cribs.
Correct.
At no cost to the town, so that we're prepared for sheltering operations. But it certainly hit us the last couple of years with some costs that we had not anticipated, and we've been working to try to address that in current year's budget and moving forward.
We do. This is the first year we actually have a small budget in case we get hit with a disaster, and we've actually used a small amount of those monies this year for some training materials and some shirts for our CERT team. Much of the training was, the cost of the training for our CERT team was provided through a grant from the Capital Region Council of Governments. But there were a few things, some training materials and some shirts that were not covered by the grant. And fortunately, we did have a budget that we could use, to cover those costs. And we have that, that budget's gonna be intact and hopefully get us through the year. And, we're also always looking for opportunities, to enhance our ability to respond to disasters. Some of the things we've purchased are, we've purchased some signage that we can put out at key intersections to help give people some direction. We've purchased some shirts so that we can put on volunteers if we have a large-scale event, so that people can, look at somebody and say, "I'll recognize them as a staff person for, whatever event is going on." We've tried to do some things. We've talked about potentially purchasing a good quality weather station for, town hall, so that we can, monitor the weather. We're always concerned when our staff are out on the roads, either plowing or pushing trees off. When is it safe? When is it not safe?
Right.
And that key seems to be somewhere around the 30, 35 mile an hour wind range. Things just get to the point that they become unsafe. And it's better for us if we know what's happening locally.
And one of the things, we talked about developing these relationships in our own staff, but even the change with the utilities as far as the power company having a liaison to us. And
Yeah, one of the things that happened at the last storm, we've had a liaison for the last several events, but one of the things that was really key during the last event was that not only did we have a liaison at Town Hall, we also had a line crew and a tree crew
Right.
who were staged here. And that, during that hurricane, they were able to restore power just about as fast as it was going out until we hit that 30, 35 mile an hour wind zone where it just became too unsafe for them to be out working. So about until 10 o'clock that night, they were out there actively restoring as many customers as they could during the storm.
And that whole process is just something that they've even learned in going through this. And so it's an ongoing process.
It continues to evolve.
And yearly, the state has some type of a statewide drill that Bolton always participates in.
Correct.
And this last time it was actually something in the Northwest Hills, so our role was far more minor than others, but we've involved people as necessary to be able to even do the statewide drills, to just talk about what are you going to do if this happens.
It's an opportunity that invokes thought, and you think about whether or not, are you ready? If this happens to us, are we ready, and what are we going to do? And so it's always key, and in that disaster, many of the towns that weren't directly involved, like the Northwest corner, played a support role.
Right.
And our role was very minor in this last one, but the previous statewide drill, we were very involved for a full day and a half.
Yes.
It was quite a project.
Yes, yes. And it's time away from other things
Other
being done.
responsibilities.
And that happens, and the town has stepped up with that. Maybe our crews are tied up for days or weeks after an emergency hits, but we do what we have to do when we have to do it.
That's correct.
Now, you mentioned CERT, and people may not know what CERT is.
CERT stands for Community Emergency Response Team. And a CERT team is made up of members, volunteer members of, in this case, the Bolton community, that have stepped up and said that they were willing, ready, and able to go for some training, and they are ready, willing, and able to volunteer in the case of an emergency. We identified long ago that some areas that we have difficulty filling as roles during an emergency are enough staff to staff a shelter operation.
Right.
We also felt that if we ever had to do commodities distribution, handing out, food and water and tarps, if we had a large-scale disaster, that would be very difficult for us to do. So we talked for a long time and finally actually got it off the ground this last year, is getting a group of individuals who are interested, trained, and ready to do this stuff. And we have a group of, I believe, 13 individuals from the Bolton community that have recently gone through the training. They've actually been activated a couple of times for non-emergency events. They were activated most recently for the festival parade here of lights, where they came from the center school down to the green and lit the light on the Christmas tree. They were activated for that. They were activated for the events this fall on the Heritage Farm. They helped out with some parking, and it's really good training for them as well.
And with that, several of them had volunteered when we needed help, informally, just trying to get people to
That's
come
correct.
help us. And so it's good to see them take that role. And I want to talk a little bit about, what that class involved, because I know it was really 8 sessions and then a final, practical experience.
Correct.
And I know you were involved in some of the training, as well as 2 other key staff people.
Correct. Well, our Tracy Verastro, who works for the town as a recreation director, has also kind of become our impromptu leader of our CERT group. Tracy took the training for CERT, I believe, about 2 years ago, and most recently took some training to become a trainer. And so she was the lead instructor for the group of individuals that went through these 8 modules. Our new fire chief, Chief Dixon, played a key role in some of the training, which is absolutely wonderful because it not only is he a great trainer, it also builds a rapport between the CERT team and the local fire department. And they did have some trouble finding enough instructors for all the modules, so I did the disaster medical module, based on my years of experience in the fire service and emergency medical technician.
So let's talk a little bit about the modules. I know the first one is just kind of an intro and overview.
And we kind of just went over that a bit. The intro is to talk to the CERT members about what roles and responsibilities they might play. And I think the most key aspect that they learn during that training is not to self-deploy.
Right.
There's always accountability, not only for their sake, but also for their safety. We want to know where they are, what they're doing, and we want to know that they're safe while doing it. And so one of the key things that they're taught, during that module is never to self-deploy. They learn that they need to be activated by the emergency management director through a process that takes place. On an emergency level, it's very quick. Otherwise, we have to do the paperwork a couple of weeks in advance. And that makes sure that they're covered for insurance purposes, right, in case they get injured.
And that goes through our state liaison for Region 3.
It does.
And that process, yes, is in an emergency basis, it's
like
a done deal. But if you're activating them like for the holiday parade, it takes a little bit longer.
They want our paperwork a minimum of 2 weeks in advance.
And the next unit is talking about disaster preparedness.
Well, it's one of the key things is they need to learn to be prepared for a disaster, because if they're in a disaster situation and they're not prepared, their family's not prepared, they become a victim instead of somebody who can be out there volunteering. So it's really key that they take preparedness seriously and be ready and be prepared and understand the things that they can do to keep themselves and their family safe and ready during an event. And
the next module is fire safety, which kind of explains itself a little bit.
It does, and I believe that was one of the modules that Chief Dixon taught, and they thoroughly enjoyed that module, and he did a great job, and they learned all about fire safety. Region 3 allowed us to borrow a fire pan, and they learned how to properly use a fire extinguisher, and they had a lot of fun with that module.
Well, it's good for your own home too.
It is. It's good practical experience.
No matter, yes. Disaster medical you taught and talked about briefly.
Yeah,
and there was actually 2 of those.
Yeah, it was a 2-week session, and it really was. It went beyond basic first aid. It taught them how to recognize the types of injuries somebody may have, and they learned about splinting, how to control bleeding, and things of that nature.
And CERT organization itself, that ties back a little bit to the intro, but talks a little bit about incident command, I know.
The incident command system and how it operates, and that there's always a leader, somebody that you go to for instruction, not to self-deploy, and that they actually are under the control of the emergency management director ultimately. And
the next unit was disaster psychology.
One of the things that happens in some of these disasters is you see and experience things that are different than what you see and experience in everyday life. And you need to be mentally prepared to handle those. In the worst case scenario, you may see death.
Right.
But you also see very sad circumstances. People's homes may have been lost. They may have severe injuries. And not everybody necessarily understands that going in. And the idea behind that module is to prepare the folks who are going to go out there and be on the front lines, help them to understand what they may see and experience, and also to understand that they may have emotions about that during and afterward, and how to handle those emotions and how to cope with those things.
That you're never alone. I very clearly, and you probably do too, remember my very first CPR,
Yep.
the person I did CPR on, because it does impact you.
It does.
And hopefully it makes you a better person.
Absolutely.
And terrorism insert. Unfortunately, terrorism is not something this country thought of 20 years ago, but the world has changed.
It has. And even though Bolton is a very small community, we do have a major highway running through our town. 384, 44 converge here. We're minutes from downtown Hartford. It's certainly a large enough population. We had an incident in Manchester a year or two ago where, there was a live shooter incident. That's in our backyard.
Yes.
And that is a form of terrorism. It may not be what we think of. It's not Osama bin Laden or somebody of that caliber, but that is a form of terrorism. And those things happen, and we need to be prepared and ready to handle those events should they occur in our community.
And then the last thing that the group did was they had a practical.
They did. Unfortunately, I was not available to be there for the practical, but it culminated in a practical exercise. Chief Dixon, again, was there and a part of that, and he felt that it went really well, that our folks were well prepared and will be well served in the future having these volunteers as members of our CERT team.
And that was the basic training, but now we're looking for some other opportunities for even these folks to do some potential additional training.
I believe I think it was in November, they did some Red Cross training for shelter operations. The other area that we're looking to get them trained in, and I believe they have a date coming up in January, again with Chief Dixon, is they're going to be learning to do traffic control. And they had some recent experience with that. Those that were activated for the parade were partnered with members of our volunteer fire department and participated in traffic control for that event.
And, that's key. And while we have this core group, now we want to build on it even as well, and we'll be looking to do another CERT training.
Absolutely. We need 10 people in order to run a class. I'm sure Tracy would be excited to do another class at some point. But if there's anybody who's listening today, whether they're in the Bolton community, the Andover community, or any other local communities, if they're interested in joining a local CERT team, they should feel free to contact either of us at the town hall here in Bolton, and we'll be happy to put them on a list. And if we don't hold a class, we can certainly get them directed toward another class that might be held in the near future.
And that's, as you mentioned, you don't necessarily have to be from Bolton, although you would wind up being part of Bolton. But in the class that they ran, we had from Columbia.
I think we had
and
two
Andover,
folks from Columbia,
and
I think it was one from Andover.
that joined us because we happened to be
were running
holding
a
the
class. Yep.
And that's key. I mean, as a community, we need to be able to basically to take care of ourselves for the first 24 to 48 hours.
So many people, we're so dependent today on electricity.
Yes.
And we're more and more dependent on both our local government, our state government, and federal government to take care of us. But we really, truly need to be better prepared to take care of ourselves, at least in the short term. If families in the town are better prepared, it's going to make our recovery efforts much more quick.
And with that, there certainly is, opportunities for regional collaboration as time goes on, as is necessary as well. That's why we do CERT classes and have people from other towns, because every community becomes stronger with this background.
Absolutely. And one of the other things that's happened recently on the state level is a couple of years ago they changed some legislation that actually allowed towns to assist one another. If we weren't badly hit by the storm, and let's say our neighboring Andover was, if we had personnel and equipment that we could lend to help them recover from their disaster, perhaps it was, a tornado did go through Andover last year. Fortunately, it was very minor in nature. Nobody was injured. There was little property damage. But had it been more severe, they might have needed to call on their neighboring communities to help them manage debris and things of that nature. And because of this change in legislation, we would have been able to, you know, send our town crew and
Right.
a loader over there to assist them without fear of, you know, crossing that town line and liability issues that occur with that.
Time is almost up. Closing thoughts?
It's always good to be prepared. And, you know, we have some preparedness information on our website. Red Cross is always a great website to go to learn to be prepared.
Thank you very much for joining me. Again, if there's anybody interested in CERT, please contact either one of us at the town hall. And, you know, we'll probably look to do something, I would guess, this spring, or
Hopefully in the
hopefully
spring.
somebody else will.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jim, very
You're
much.
welcome.
Just a couple of closing comments. Certainly, I'm hoping that the spirit of the holidays will continue, that there's those random acts of kindness out there, that I hope everybody continues to be safe and warm as we're in that winter season. And just a note that the Board of Selectmen's meeting is on January 14th, that we're not meeting the first Tuesday of the month in January, that it is January 14th. The next show, we will be welcoming our new town clerk, Elizabeth Waters. Susan DePold, our longtime town clerk, is retired as of December 31st. And once again, thank you to Community Voice Channel for its continued support, and I will see you in 2 weeks.